Where's the beat? I want to hear the beat. What's that?
I think we're getting the hang of this program a little bit. So what's up, Ivan? Good morning.
So I'm good, man. I'm good. You have your coffee or your tea,
I'm ready to
your
go.
glass of water, whatever it is.
What about yourself? How you doing this morning?
I'm good, man. I'm good. So last week, if anybody's been following us, we had some technical difficulties. So this is actually our second episode, and this is Courage to Continue, from test to testimonials. And I love this because I really think that, you remember that book, How to Win Friends and Influence People by Dale Carnegie? And one of the things that he talks about in the book is that people love to tell you about themselves, right? You've heard that saying before, right, Jose? Like, they like to talk about themselves. And I think when it comes to dealing with adversity, it actually adds another layer to that element where people like to tell their stories, but not so much in a way that it becomes a sob story, but hopefully, and I don't want this to be like a curated assembly of people that are coming on just to share their stories of glory, but I want this to be a platform where people do share their stories. And I think our human nature is to want to tell people about our stories, but also to share with the world how vicissitudes are part of life. Having shitty moments in life is simply part and parcel with this freaking experience. This modern world experience.
It's what living is. You're gonna have your obstacles. You gotta push forward. So that's our discussion. Yeah, we discussed it in depth last week, but we left off
2 weeks ago. 2 weeks ago, not last week.
2 weeks ago. Yeah. Wow, time flies. Absolutely. Yeah, but me and you've been discussing off air what we wanted to be, and it's not necessarily something to triumph or that those elements are in there, perseverance is in there, but it's about like you said, having your test and then making it a testimony of what that experience is, so that we can all kind of like all put a sigh of relief at the end of the story and understand how we get through these things without making it into like a big deal. It's just
but
move forward. What's the next step?
It is a big deal, though. It is a big deal. This is tough, and Mike and Derek were just talking about this, about these vicissitudes that we go through in life. It is hard, and we need community. We need, it's interesting. Just this very morning, I was reading a study, this is yet another reason why I think shows like this are so important. And when we have our guest on, Celicia, hopefully she'll add to that. But they were talking about socializing, just networking, our ability to connect with other fellow human beings. And sometimes you think that, for example, exercise is important. Inarguably, we could say that exercise is critical for our health. Does that make sense, Jose?
Yeah. Go ahead.
All right. Does it make sense that getting optimal sleep, getting 7 to 8 hours is critical, right?
Yeah.
So we all know these things. We all know that eating well is important for optimal health. But what's sometimes not so obvious is that connecting with people on a social level, like going to a bar, for example, and hanging out with your friends, your colleagues, whatever it is, going places, just socializing, congregating, that in and of itself is a predictor of health and longevity. So socializing, communicating, engaging in discourse like this is very helpful. because what are the reasons behind why platforms like this are important? I think number one, it's cathartic, but number two, you're connecting with other human beings. And I think there's merit to why, and certainly it's substantiated by research now, that connecting with human beings is critical for our health. Even more so, it's what's crazy is this study that I read, it's an even bigger predictor than doing the things that are, at least in many people's eyes, obvious, like eating well, sleeping well, all those things. Social networking is critically important.
We're social beings, right? So
Without a doubt.
That you gotta keep that balance. That's part of it. And like Mike, our good friend, always says, these things are about revelation through conversation, and speaking is therapeutic. It lets you retell the story. It kind of lets you own it, and that's what this is about. What I meant before by I didn't mean to minimalize it. What I mean is that by sharing these experiences, we have more control over it. So they don't seem as unsurmountable. It's what I meant, not minimalizing it, but that we all go through these things. So with that said, I don't know if you want to bring Salisha on at this point. We've kind of set a few things up already for if anybody's watching. So you want to click her in or send her the invite? How do we do that? We're kind of both programs.
Yeah, I'll have her come on now.
Yeah.
But the point that I was trying to say, though, Jose, is that
I mean that's
the point. The point that I'm trying to say is that we're not getting it now, right? It's pretty clear that we're not getting this interaction, at least in the capacity that we did in pre-COVID. And I think this is why these platforms are critically important. It's because it allows people to connect, and we need that.
Yeah,
we need that. We're as you said, we're social beings. Is Salisha in the
Yeah, she is.
broadcast?
Let me add it to the stream.
Let's add her on. Hey, Salisha. Good morning.
Hi.
Good morning.
My background is darker than you guys.
How you doing, Salisha?
You guys are turning up. I look whack. I didn't even dress up.
Hey, it is.
This is
Sunday morning.
This is an authentic show from top to bottom. We just keep it real. I just
that's
woke
good,
up.
Mike. What about that?
This is how I look when I wake up.
What about this light?
You look good. You look good. Hey, Melissa.
Okay, so this is on your page. Can I go on your page and share it?
Yeah, go for it. Go for it. So
you guys are like rocking and rolling. I like this format.
Look at that. Look at you. So, Salisha, Jose and I were talking about, the premise of the show, Courage Continue, is an extension of the book that you helped me with. So I think it's apropos that you're our first guest on episode 2. You're funny. But
apropos.
The platform that we want to create is from test to testimonials, right?
Okay, I like that.
When people go through shit, when people go through adversity, a lot of times we get through it because that's how life works. We get through hard times. But sometimes when we share these moments, we could inspire and motivate others. So
yeah,
when we were thinking of a lineup of guests, it was hard to not think of you almost immediately because of some of the things that you've gone through. Yeah, you.
Oh.
Yeah,
well, you got me up early, so we getting ready to be on for at least whatever. I don't know what time this is on. But now that I'm up early, you might as well get ready because
up early. When you're introducing yourself, you oftentimes refer to yourself, and this is a touching subject. It makes me feel uncomfortable even saying it, but it's the truth. It's your hardship. It was your reality, but you refer to yourself as an angel mom.
Oh, okay.
Do you want to tell us about that experience and what it took to overcome that? Like all the, where you pulled your strength from to overcome?
Yeah, it's interesting because just hearing you say that, there are a lot of women, they're angel moms and angel dads, right? So those are people who have children that went on to heaven. You know what I'm saying? So I had a stillbirth. I was 28 weeks, I think. So it's interesting you say that because that was in 2013, but now I still consider myself an angel mom, but now I have the title of breast cancer survivor. So it's like they happened last year. Being diagnosed with stage 1 breast cancer. So your book is spot on because through every phase in your life, you're going to always need courage to continue. See what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And I'm thinking back, and you brought that up, and it's like, wow, I still think about that because it's not like something that goes away. But you have kids. Do you have kids? You have kids?
I do. I got 3 kids.
You have 3. So it's interesting. So people with children understand that. So imagine like if you're a wife or you're married, I'm assuming, or girlfriend. Okay, I don't want to get your business out there. But she's 27, 20 and a half weeks, and then there's no heartbeat, so that's what happened to me. I was, dealing with issues throughout my pregnancy, which now looking back, and okay, so here's the story. So I was dealing with issues with my pregnancy and just there wasn't oxygen getting to the baby or nutrients, and nobody could figure it out. Like, they didn't know if it was umbilical cord nothing was coming through because she wasn't growing. So eventually, she's struggling to try to breathe and live, inside the womb, and her heart stopped. So I went through 30 hours of labor trying to deliver her because they make you go through labor. They don't just say, oh, let's go in and have a C-section. That's by law, they can't do that. So you have to try to deliver. And it was all kind of complications because she was so small, because we were trying to get her at least to 1 pound in order to, induce labor. So that pretty much changed my whole thinking on life. I went through a very, very, as you can imagine, very, very dark phase. With the pregnancy, I gained a whole bunch of weight. I was already a little kind of, could have, needed some pounds gone, but I gained a whole bunch of weight. The 30 hours of labor was, the epidural was in your back. And when the epidural wore off, I had the most horrific nerve pain shooting down my left leg. Like, it was unheard of. So they didn't know if it was from pushing, during childbirth, or if it was, I think it was the epidural, but they can't say that because then you'll sue, and then everybody will sue. So, but it could have been a combination of trauma. And so I had this nerve pain. So I went to see a neurologist. They tried to put me on
gabapentin.
That didn't work, and it was just shooting pain. So they kind of diagnosed me with, I forgot what it was called. It's such a blur.
Lumbar radiculopathy.
That and something else where it's pressure. Something, I don't know. Yeah. But anyway, the neurologist referred me to a physical therapist. And here
you bringing this story full circle. Okay, I see where you're going with this. I gotta bring
it full circle because it's deep.
That's important.
God makes no mistakes. So they referred me to a physical therapist. And my neurologist, I guess, used to send patients to Dr. Ivan. And so I had to go to Dr. Ivan, Executive Park Physical Therapy. The first therapist I saw, she no longer works at his place, but she was not a very good therapist. So
I'm not going to mention any names.
No. So I stopped going, but then I started back. So this was in 2014. I was going, then I stopped, but the pain lasted forever. So mind you, I just lost a baby, and I'm walking around with leg pain. And for some reason, I'm not in this box right there. I'm walking around with leg pain. So I said, let me go back. So my neurologist was like, you can't stop going. You just got to keep going back to Dr. Ivan's office. So when I went back the next time, I got one of his therapists, Tirza, who's amazing. And then that's when I met Dr. Ivan. And so and I'm not here to try to toot your horn, but
No. Listen.
No, but
if
I'm
you want
just
to
saying.
toot the horn, you could toot the horn, but
what I'm saying, this is how it makes sense with Courage to Continue. So this is in 2015. You're going through a deep depression, and he really changed my whole perspective on exercise, diet. I was like 200 and I got up to about 236 pounds. When I was going to see him, I think I was like 220 something. And, so on top of nerve pain, they was like, they were like, you got to lose weight. So I'm going through a depression. I'm fat. I got shooting pains going down my leg. Okay. So you talk about Courage to Continue. And then Dr. Ivan is in my ear. He's not even my therapist in the office. He's just in my ear, like, you need to do that. You need to do that. So then so that's how we met. And he challenged me to a weight loss competition. I got to bring up this story. And I'm competitive. Now, this is all in the height
if I'm not mistaken, before you continue, I think Jose was in that same weight loss challenge.
No. I never made
You sure about that?
Jose,
all right, go ahead, Felicia. I thought he was. I thought he was.
Then I can say I beat Jose too. So.
I think he's being shy, but go ahead.
No.
So his weight loss challenges, Jose.
Yes.
So I got in it. It was 50 other people. Not sure if Jose was in it. But I beat everyone and I won the challenge. I beat everybody. I lost 20 something pounds in 6 weeks. But here's how I did it. Because Dr. Ivan and all of the principles are in his book. Dr. Ivan he didn't know it, but he was not only motivating me, but he was educating me and getting me out of a funk of depression. He did not know it at the time. But I thank him, and he knows it was huge because he taught me things like different ways of eating, of living, intermittent fasting, HIIT training. And it was things I knew, but things I didn't know, but just as the mindset around sleep, your mindset, and so that's how I got out of that, that funk. And then from there, I lost, another, I think 40 some pounds. In total, I lost like 60 to 70 pounds. I'm back up 10 pounds, but that's a whole story. So that was a time period where so from that moment, and this is really when it comes. And if anybody's out there listening, I don't know if you guys have people out there listening. I see a couple people, but if you guys are listening, the way to get out of a deep depression is to totally change your wellness mindset. Like food, diet, stress management, sleep, exercise. I didn't get on any drugs. They didn't put me on antidepressants, all this other stuff. All of those things will change the trajectory of your life, but also that you can will yourself or get yourself out of depression. Now, is it easy? That's something that, that's another thing. Jose, that. Dr.
Well, you know what I think you're making me think about Ivan, the doctor, not Ivan, my friend. But what Ivan does well in his office, and it's going to sound like it's a commercial for your therapy office, but he's a professional in the way that you go in and he understands, like, as I'm hearing your story, what I get out of what you're saying is he gave you like a goal. You all of a sudden had a purpose, and he knows how to do that well. He understands the mechanisms in the office so that you do certain, small steps. You push through by doing the little things, overcoming the small things, like, a simple exercise, the eating diet, and it's all manageable because it's little by little, and it resets you. You have a new plan, you have a purpose, you're trying to lose weight, you're trying to win a competition. All of a sudden, your mind is on something completely different, and it all starts falling into place altogether. And I think that that's an important strategy, in trying to get this different strategies. But that's a good one. But I want to ask you. You said about you were in a dark phase, and it's kind of a weird question, but do you think that all the phases are necessary? And I know you go through them, so to ask necessary, it's a weird word to put through that. But did you can you look back and say, I could have gone through this without going through the dark phase, or you think that all those stages of the funk are necessary? What do you think about that?
That's a good question. I do think it's different for everybody, but in the case of losing a baby when you're like 40 years old, you say, now let me add this too. Along with Dr. Ivan, I was going to support groups for a year and a half, and I was going to therapists twice a month, like every other week. So I think people are always going to go through phases, dark phases. For some, it may not be as bad. For others, it may be bad. But I think you're always going to go through dark phases in your life. It's just different for each person. And that, when I look back, I had to go through that because I would have never met, Dr. Ivan. I would have never lost the weight. And now my whole mindset is different. It's all about deadlifting. And squatting and bench pressing. Okay. How would I get to that? Okay. So I feel like, but now, and so too, that also prepared me for this next phase of getting diagnosed with stage 1 breast cancer. Here I am after losing weight, and I still got weight to lose. And now, it was hormonal based, right? So I was producing too much estrogen, and so getting the breast cancer diagnosis, Ivan helped me with that. He hooked me up with Kaja. I don't know if you know Kaja, but
no.
Shout out to Dr. Kaja. It just putting me on the right nutrients and supplements. But then all of that, everything I went through before helped me get through this. So now I know what I need to do. There's certain things more I got to cut out of my diet. I got to reduce stress. So, but that was a period I'm still dealing with because, I had a lumpectomy. I had to go through 4 weeks, 20 rounds of radiation, which I still get the effects of. And now I'm on hormone therapy. So I think in life, you're going to go through stuff. Some people are just chosen to go through a lot of shit. I feel like me and Ivan have that in common. Like we just have to have.
Man, I'm the chosen one if that's the case.
Well, you'll be the male chosen and I'm the female.
You're the female equivalent of me.
The king and queen of
okay. One thing that becomes apparent when I'm listening to you and I'm drawing connections between myself and even some of the stories that Jose has shared is that things happen, but it's our perception of what's happening that determines the intensity of the adversity, right? It's our perception. But what's interesting is that perception has a lot of factors. So if you have a strong social network, if you have a support network, that's going to help you a great deal. If you're eating well, if you're sleeping well, all of these things create the amount of resiliency that you need that will determine whether or not it's a really bad situation or that you won't get through, or it could be a bad situation that you will find the courage to continue. And listening to you, I think, and I'm sure you realize this, is that you had multiple things working in your favor to get you over the hump. So yes, you implemented lifestyle changes, and you owe me credit. You credited me to making you think differently in terms of how you eat and live. But you also had that support network, and I think that's what the office and running these programs and the support groups that you did offered you, is that you had humans on your side, you know,
Right.
supporting you. And I think that is a very critical component that, because it's hard to dose, it doesn't get valued as much. But we need congregation, we need support networks, we need to talk. Humans are very tribal. We always say that. And I think the more of this that we do, the easier it is for people to overcome adversity.
Yeah, and I
Plus
think,
those other individual things.
but also you make a good point, because at your office, and just in your network, you know, with the Get Mad crew, the boot camp crew, you know, as we entered into 2017 and we're doing the boot camps, that stuff kept me going, pushing through. And then the powerlifting, and then everybody would do, you know, the showcases and deadlifting. And again, going back to Jose's point, you have a goal, you have a purpose. So, but when you have a team, or like you said, the social support, it's very key. Now, so what are your guys' thoughts on people that don't have anybody? There's a lot of people that don't have nobody in their corner.
You know, I think that's why as we get more people on and they tell their story, I think there's a lot of strategies to overcoming stuff. And that's why I go back, like, you know, I saw you wrote a couple of books. I looked up on entrepreneurship and things like that. And I think that I was going to ask you, do you think that, is it the same skill set? I mean, I would argue that it probably is, right, to be resilient. But is it a skill set that you could write a formula out, or do we all have, you know, different coping mechanisms?
That's a good question, Jose. Look at Jose doing research.
Jose's doing research.
Come on.
Due diligence. Okay, Jose.
Okay. You know, he is podcast ready. I think I like that question, because I am in the process of finishing a second book. It's called The Resilience Factor: How to Face Adversity Like a Superhero. So
I love it.
You like my title?
I love that.
I do have so that book is going to be all about how to get through it. And there is a chapter in there on how me running my own company, having my own business, also was part of my resilience. And I do think there are similarities of entrepreneurship and courage to continue and facing adversity. Because when you think about entrepreneurs, they're risk takers. And in going through things and like fighting through and trying to beat depression, you have to take a risk on, guess what, yourself and maybe the people around you. So I do like that analogy where you're trying to, because there are steps and strategies that are in place. I like that.
Yeah,
you know what's interesting, Salisha, is that in a lot of ways, right, physical pain, it's so multifactorial, but one of the things that helps with physical pain is exercise. And there's so many reasons why, but one reason that often is not noticed is that exercise is a distraction from the pain itself. So distractions are important to minimize the perception of a threat, which creates pain. But listening to you right now, it seems that over the years, through these adversities, you've always kept yourself so busy. You always got a production crew in your house. You always doing something. And I think in a lot of ways, you keeping busy with everything that you're doing, with all your entrepreneurial pursuits, have helped you get through the hardships in recent years. You know, from 2015 to 2018, 2013. So, you know, I think for anyone who's listening, that's another, like, I want this platform to leave actionable advice for anyone who's listening. And I think some of the actionable advice so far has been, look for a support network. It's hard to do it by yourself. You sought us out and we were helpful toward, you know, with the things that you were dealing with. But another actionable piece of advice is that you got to keep yourself busy when you're going through hardship, because there's so many elements as to why it helps. But one of those elements is that it distracts you, and in distracting you from the source of pain, whether it's emotional or physical, it changes your perception of what that threat or potential threat is.
No, it's wild because to just kind of envelope the whole thing, you kind of you're into pain management, and a lot of these things are painful. So when you come at it, through the medical and scientific, it applies. And it's almost like I was gonna say to you guys, it's like resiliency is almost like a muscle. You got to work out, you got to build, in order to continue to, get it stronger.
Jose's dropping bombs this morning.
Dropping bombs, and in my book, there's a whole. I wish I had my book up, but there's a whole chapter on like the health and wellness component and I kind of chronicle from all the different stages. But I talk about powerlifting and the benefits of it. And I would have gotten to this point. I would never be thinking I would talk about powerlifting and like trying to reach your 1 rep max, but the benefits of it. So that is perfect what Jose is saying, because I feel like resiliency is like a muscle. Like you gotta work it. And sometimes it's, it'll fail you.
Don't you think, looking at the people that attended those classes, right? Retrospect is always 2020. And when you look back at every individual, or most of them, that were coming to the powerlifting class and the other classes, it seems as if everyone was dealing with something, and the powerlifting class became an outlet to unleash their wrath, their distress, the adversity that they were dealing with. So it's very interesting how powerlifting, the obvious thing is that it helps with your physical goals, but there's an emotional component to it, because it makes you realize that you could overcome barriers that initially may seem difficult to overcome. So there's a figurative kind of component to it. Like, you never thought that you'd be able to lift 250 pounds from the floor. But then eventually you did 250
240.
No, you did 245.
I did.
I tricked you. It was 245. I believe it was 245. I got to check the footage.
It's 240. It's cool. I'm gonna get to 251.
You got there, but the point is that you never thought in 2013 you would have been able to do that. And so how do we, excuse the word, but how do we extrapolate that experience to other life experiences? And the thing is, you say, shit, if I could do this, if I could get to this point, well, I could get to this point in this other facet of my life. So, those are one of the many benefits of powerlifting. I think it's a way of developing your resiliency.
Yeah, and I think also too, like you guys know, we're all adults here. I think so when we talk to 20-something-year-olds, they will look at something they go through and be like, oh my God, it's the worst ever. But then you get to our age and it's like, I done been through that, plus this, plus this, plus this. You'll live, right? Not to dismiss them, but I think life and experience play a role in it too.
Yeah, that was kind of the point at the beginning of the podcast that I was trying to make, is that by listening to stories is not minimalizing what anybody went through, but we understand that these adversities are part of life. So you're able to, it's not you're not taking a big chunk out of it. And no, Ivan, I'm not hungry. All right, but you don't take a big chunk. You take small bites.
His analogies always include food, but that's another story.
Somehow I haven't seen the food in it, but it's small bites that you take out of it. But I find kind of like a similarity in going back to your personal story with being an angel mom, and in correlating it, since you since you have a few books about entrepreneurship, I think one of the tough things about that, as you were telling the story, and I don't want to get like overly personal, but I know that when you're expecting a child, you have a vision. You have, it's beyond the 30 weeks to 40. You're thinking about it. Same thing with a business. I mean, or any plan. And when it doesn't go through, that's something that you got to find that resiliency to push through and create a new vision. And
Jose, let me tell you something, and because you have kids. See, I don't have kids.
Yeah.
And so that made it even, that makes it even a little more,
Mm-hmm.
But let me tell you something. You hit it right on the nail. I had a room, I had the wall painted yellow. So, as the pregnancy went on, I was like, I held back from like baby shower planning and stuff like that because I was like, But I envisioned a lot of things. I had vision about a lot of things about, it was a girl. So I was like, oh, we're going to really like dress alike, a whole thing, right?
Yeah.
So that is true. You have that big plan and then one day it's gone. So you literally have to reprogram your mind. It goes back to mindset, perspective, like Ivan was saying, you got to think about, okay, so now what is my life going to be like now? And Ivan's right. I did keep busy. I mean, I could sit back and be like, man, I've gone through some shit. And then you'd be like, didn't you go to South Africa? Yeah. And then you go on a tour. And then you do this. And then you do a whole TV show. So I have kept busy, but I don't want people to think that I was like just doing stuff and not taking care of myself. But there were points where I would just, I guess, put myself into my work a lot, but I always understood the importance of at least, therapy and working out.
Another thing is that it seemed from my vantage point that you've reconciled how life can be impermanent, how things change, and you're always willing to accept change and move on to another chapter. Think about think about you've moved several times over the course of the past 5 years. You've taken on new projects. You've had different experiences personally, with respect to relationships, and you've always embraced change. And I think that too is something that adds to your personal resiliency factor, is that you have the ability to accept change, right? We all know that the only constant is change. And those that are oppositional to change have a tough time adapting. You seem, from afar, to do well, or you seem to accept change as part of life.
Yeah.
Is this something that you do naturally? Or is this something that you have to work on? Is this something that you have to think about? Like, all right, now I have to pivot once again in my life, either it's personally or professionally, and I have to move forward. Or how do you embrace these changes over the past 5 years? Is it something that happens organically, or do you have to put some mental muscle into it to pivot?
That's a really good point. Thank you for your compliment. My personal philosophy is that change is inevitable. However, when you're going through it, you feel like it's a piece of shit, but you feel like it's a disaster.
Jose, is there cursing allowed in this show?
Oh God, excuse me. So we're adults. So it is a conscious effort. For the most part, I do realize that I have to keep going. But then it goes back to, having a support system. If you could ask somebody their thoughts on certain things, that helps. Therapy. I'm in therapy right now. This pandemic is a change. The whole coronavirus, you add that on top of any other changes and fighting and trying to stay cancer-free.
Insidious pain.
It's a fool. So, and I guess the pandemic affected everybody. That's a big change. But I do approach it from a standpoint of I do think it's about the resilience factor. And that's why I named my book The Resilience Factor, because people don't realize how resilient they are until they come out on the other side. And I think sometimes with resiliency or with changing, there is resiliency. So I think they kind of go together. But I think change is inevitable. Now, some changes hurt. Okay. they really get in your gut. But there's what are you going to do about it? You know, there's certain things that you just can't control. And I think Ivan always says you can control the uncontrollable. What is that you always say?
Control the controllables.
Control the controllables. And some of these things, especially if you're dealing with other people that are part of the changes, you can't control other people. You can only control yourself. So control the controllables.
You know, that's wonderful to hear. Jose, I have to say, this is what you just said encapsulates the new emerging model in healthcare. You basically said that change, in order to accept change, we have to have resiliency. And a lot of this resiliency has to do with intrinsic and extrinsic factors. And the way we deal with change is how we identify our ability to cope with stress, our internal locus of control, and the support systems that we have. And listen, you've done a lot with that. You've done a lot to help yourself on an individual level, and you're always around people. And so I think that it speaks loudly to why you continue to persevere through everything that you face in life.
I think an important point, though, with your story is that you see people. Or the only way that I can describe it is comparing it. You see people that just move along and they really don't address the problem. They don't take time to digest it and then exhale. And you do that. You don't just move forward away from it. It sounds like you take the time to kind of process it and build that resiliency.
Well, you know what I learned, Jose, is that just even in writing my book, we're always going to face adversity, tragedy, and trauma at some point. And it could be on a small scale or a big scale. So death is not an option. We have, but for some people, they contemplate suicide. And I think that's why this podcast is important for people, because if you're always going to face adversity, tragedy, trauma, then you really have to will yourself, and you have to know how to navigate through it. You really do. And there are, of course, extreme cases of people feeling, like I said, suicidal. And that's where it goes to a new level. And I can say, I'm an open book, but there were points in my life where I thought I was suicidal, and I'm an open book. But I think everybody has faced that point where you be like, well, if I wasn't here, it'd be better. It's like, no, you just won't be here. And actually, it'll be worse because you'll mess up the people around you, love you, and so that's But everybody has that. Not everybody.
That's important because that's exactly what we're talking to. Is you got to come to accepting that understanding that you described. It's it's not necessarily just a talking point. You got to accept that understanding that, okay, yeah, you want to consider that as an option, but there's other things going on. I got, like you just described, it's going to affect other people. But you gotta accept it, not just hear it. You got to really accept it.
A lot of times in healthcare, and it's just my instinct to hear some of the things that you're saying and relate it to what I'm trying to preach every single day. But a lot of times in healthcare, with the current way we do things, we tell patients that you have a certain diagnosis and that you have to correct something in order to get better. So if you have arthritis, if you have shoulder pain or back pain, and there's a disc that's protruding, that has to be fixed. And when you look at the research over the past 15 years, overwhelmingly what it shows is that the human body is highly adaptable, that we don't necessarily need intervention, certainly surgical intervention, to fix things, that the body has the capacity to heal on its own. So as long as you put the body in the optimal environment for it to heal, right? And another thing, it constantly is showing that there are a lot of things that happen to us that not necessarily is the source of our pain. So there are many people walking around with disc herniations, and disc herniations are no different than gray hair and wrinkles. It's just part of the human body. And what's interesting is that you could apply this on emotional levels too. Like sometimes the things that we carry is simply part of aging. It's a badge of honor. It's a sign of what we went through, but that's not necessarily gonna affect us negatively. You know, the human body is highly, highly, highly adaptable. If it weren't, we wouldn't be around 300,000 plus years to this day, right? That's how adaptable we are as a species. So I like what you're saying, and I wish that what you're saying, more people recognize that as well, that we are highly adaptable, and despite many adversities, we could overcome. The human spirit and also our physical, the bio element, is very adaptable to change and overcome.
You know, it's another thing, guys, that was another, and I think I have a lot of different moments in my life, but one of the most humbling experiences for me was I've had many, but this one was humbling. So after you have your surgery for breast cancer, you have to go. They recommend radiation. Of course, I didn't have to, but I didn't want any chances. So the radiation process, like going to radiation 4 weeks, 5 days a week, and you had 20 rounds of radiation, was a very humbling process. And so for me, I was stage 1, stage 2. They later classified as stage 2, but my doctor was like, don't bother telling people stage 2 because it's out. But it really was the size of like a strawberry, the tumor. Wow. But what I realized was that when I was going to radiation, I was taking a train, and I went to every session alone. A train, a Uber, another train. It was crazy. But when I would walk in there, and I'm just going for radiation, for a lumpectomy, a left side, there were people in there for chemo, right? So here's my point. Another key thing that I had to start thinking about, like there were women in there going through it from chemo, because chemo is another level of radiation. And so I would be sitting, as I'd be, down on myself, sitting there like, but then I would see these women with all these, they're wrapped up in sheets because they get the chill effects after all these side effects. And they're sitting there waiting on their chemo. And I'm like, let me straighten up, because my little radiation is just over here. And I'm very tired leaving. You're very tired leaving radiation. There's pain, but you can walk out. You see what I'm saying? And so I started to also think like, you got to be grateful for your process, because there's always somebody going through something worse. So I'm in there, not to downplay radiation, because it was a nightmare. But then when I looked at what some of these other people were going through, I had to step back and be like, okay, you could get through this.
So when you're dealing with something, right, and you look at someone else who's dealing with something worse than you,
right,
it does give you perspective. It makes you realize, you know what, I don't have it that bad.
Right.
But do you think that in doing that, sometimes you could trivialize or minimize, as Jose's been saying, your own personal experience? Like, shouldn't you, if you're dealing with something, should you embrace it for what it is? Because comparing yourself to someone else may not necessarily lead to the healing that you need on an emotional level. What are your thoughts about that?
Yeah, I agree with. I see what you're saying, but
Yeah.
it's not that I'm comparing, but it goes back to your point, and I think Jose made this point too. It's perspective. I don't think enough human beings we put things in perspective. We catastrophize. What's catastrophize everything. And I'm not saying that there's some things that are going to hurt, but I do think we have to put things in perspective, especially if, you've got doctors telling you you can do it, you can get through it. You got people, when you're going through it, of course, it's, it doesn't feel good. But I think that light bulb clicking, seeing, women actually go through, and men, they were there for cancer in general. Because I was going to Mount Sinai Radiation Oncology Department over there on West 59th. But so it was just cancer people in general. But I think it gives you perspective. I mean, Jose, you guys agree? I'm not comparing and like, oh, well, they died.
I think you're right, and I think that when you're going through something, and I think about it like you could be going through something at home with the kids or at work. It seems like the end of the world. It seems your world gets smaller and smaller, and sometimes we're lucky that something happens and kind of gives us that perspective. Like you said, you got there and you saw someone else. It's everything in your mind is your world, and it's that big. It's that much bigger until you gain that perspective and you're able to see somebody else is going through something. I mean, it's hard to put these things into like measurement terms, like larger or whatever. But
right.
It give you perspective.
I think the dose makes the poison, right? Like it depends how much you compare yourself to someone else. There's a saying that I like to think about from time to time, and it's comparison is the thief of joy. And sometimes you have to appreciate what you're going through and not necessarily magnify or trivialize your own personal experience when you compare it to someone else's. It's your own personal experience. You can't say, oh, my back pain is not that bad because this person's back pain allows them not to walk.
Right.
So but at the same time, perspective is important. So I think it's right. It's the dose. It's how much of comparing you do, but you do want to appreciate and recognize your own hardship because you need to get through it. You can't always compare yourself and say, well, I have food in my house. My life isn't that bad. It may not be bad to other people in the world, but to you it is.
Right. But I get what you're saying, but you would be the first to say your back pain isn't that bad because I've helped 1,000 patients with back pain. So get your ass up and go over there and squat. Now, would you be the first to say that?
I would.
Okay.
I would.
It's not comparison. It's not comparing. I totally agree with you. You have to embrace your story. But there are some people that will just fall out and just never get it. You get what I'm saying.
Yeah.
No, and it can feel that way, and there's nothing wrong with feeling that way. But when we're lucky to gain perspective, because not all of us, and not every problem, we're able to see something. And I don't know if comparison is exactly the right word, but not always do we get to see something that we can compare, even though I don't know if it's comparison to our own experience. But when you gain that perspective, it puts things in its proper place, in a healthy place.
Salisha, there was a study, and Jose, there was a study back in 2017, and the findings of the study indicated that people who catastrophize the meaning of their pain experience oftentimes threaten their own future well-being. So this is a point to say sometimes comparison is good, sometimes, because if you think that it's the end of the world, then it may in fact immobilize you. You may in fact not want to get up and get out, which are things that are therapeutic. So perspective, perception is very valuable. So, it depends how much you do it, right? You don't want to compare yourself all the time, but sometimes giving yourself some perspective will allow you to say, you know what, it's not that bad. Let me get my ass up. Let me pull my bootstraps up. Let me get going, because it is not moving. It is not taking that step forward in any direction, whether it's a physical thing, a professional thing, an emotional thing. It is not moving that really is a real threat to your ability to overcome hardship.
You know what's interesting too, and this goes back to, this is all basically what we're talking about. I mean, this is my camera. When I was after I lost the baby, I was going to support groups, and it was women and men in there. But after a while, the men stopped coming, so that's a different story. But there were women in there that were on their second and third stillbirth. Okay, go with me here. There was a woman in there, and a lot of these people I'm still friends with. There was a woman in there that lost twins. There was a woman in there at 36 weeks, delivered, and then the baby died. So again, here comes Celicia at 27 and a half, 28 weeks. I didn't get to hold the baby like some people did, because there was some other issues and drama, which we won't get into because I don't want to make your audience so depressed. But again, when I was in the support group, when I was in, there were people in my opinion, that were in not worse situations, but that had more complex or detrimental situations. So again, it helped me put things in perspective. And I remember one of the women in there saying she had gone through 2 stillbirths, one at 9 months and one a little bit earlier. And we were talking, and she was like, yes, and I'm crazy enough that I'm going to try to get pregnant again. She was like, yep. So, and that, to me, that was like, that woman is resilient. She's not going to give up. To go through two, miscarriages or stillbirths or any of that. And she was like, I'm going to, and there was a woman in there that had 5 miscarriages, but she was like, but I won't give up. You know what I'm saying? So all of these experiences really did teach me stuff. And women are resilient anyway. So I know you guys understand that because you guys have children. But it just made me think like, wow, these women are superheroes in my eyes. You know what I'm saying? So it's not me comparing, but I'm like, girl, stop. You can't, it makes you not want to complain as much.
You said something, tongue in cheek, but I think there's some merit to it. I think that there are cultural, gender differences or influences that affect our ability to adapt and to be resilient. I could tell you, the Latino culture, we oftentimes seek solace from people. We're looking for, I hate to say it, but we do look for pity. We do look for that. And we need that to reconcile our own feelings. We need that bendito, everything is going to be okay. Oh my God, bendito, everything is going to be okay. And as a woman,
I hate when you say that.
I know, but it's the truth. These are cultural influences that affect everyone's individual. There's so many influences, but certainly culture, gender,
I agree,
and multiple other things affect your ability to cope. And I think as a Black woman, you're a double minority.
Right.
You're strong. You deal with a lot. You deal with a lot of adversity day to day. Right. And so, yes, if I had to create a figurative term for you, you're a superwoman because you deal with a lot day to day. You're a superhero because you deal with a lot day to day, and then you've overcome and have been triumphant with some of these bigger setbacks.
I agree with you, and there are tons of studies out there. I'm sure men, women face adversity different, but even like New Yorkers. 9/11, you talk to any New Yorker, they're like, what this pandemic is nothing. We eat pandemics and, 9/11, you know what I'm saying? I think culturally and also where you're from too.
Yeah. Well, yeah. Geographically, culturally, gender,
New Yorkers are
your
tough.
religion.
I feel like New Yorkers are tough. And people from Chicago, and I'm from Chicago. I feel like they're tough. Because when I speak to people and like from other states and cities, I've lived in many places. New Yorkers and people from Chicago are probably some of the toughest people.
Does anyone have any questions for Celicia while she's on? Does anyone have any questions?
I'm looking at your little feed. These people, somebody's talking about drop a flex bomb. Who is that?
Where do I didn't see that. Drop a flex bomb. Okay.
People are crazy.
But if there are no questions.
Oh, that was Michael Gomez.
Oh yeah, Mike. Well, Celicia, I want to say thank you. I think Jose, I think we should always wrap it up in a way where we could summarize actionable steps that one could take to overcome adversity. And I think some of the things that Celicia spoke to is that you need a support group. You have to actively seek out a support group, whether it's speaking with someone on an individual level or surrounding yourself with people. Yeah. So I think that's one thing. One actionable piece of advice that I think some of our listeners could benefit from. But the thing is, it's tough in this, dealing with COVID. It's hard to put yourself in group settings. It's, I go home, I go to work, I go home, I go to work. So it's tough.
I want people to take away the biggest thing that they can do for themselves, especially during a pandemic, during COVID-19, Corona. And you could do this at your house, is to exercise at least 5 times a week. That's going to improve your mental.
Look at you.
I swear, I promise you. Shut up, Ivan.
Look at you.
Exercise should be the thing that people, because it's going to improve. Even if you're in the house, jumping jacks, push-ups, exercise is going to be the thing to change your mood and change your chemistry. I just tried to make you proud, Ivan. That's all.
Wow, I'm about to shed a tear. Jose, do you want to add anything?
Do you agree? Jose agrees with me.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, these are the little steps that, again, going back to Ivan's office, we're talking about it in the podcast as far as stories, but Ivan understands in his office on how to like do the thing, like pick this up, put that down. And those are all the small things that little by little kind of get you into a better mindset and help you work through the pain. Yeah, absolutely. But we're on an hour now.
Thank you guys for having me.
No, thank you for coming on. I think
thanks, Alicia.
It was a little rocky start, but I made it here.
All right. So have a good rest of the weekend, Sunday, and
you got to drop the beat before we on the outro.
Man, I don't know if I know how to do that.
I'm gonna leave now. Do I leave? Yes.
Well, you want to listen to our outro?
It's really good.
Music?
Yeah.